Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Theology. And my guest today is Marian Jacobs, who has a background in theater arts and is an avid reader. She's a writer, a wife and mother, and a current seminary student. She's the author of the recently released book On Magic and Miracles, a theological guide to discerning fictional magic. And this becomes a topic of our fascinating conversation. I have not met Marian before, so I didn't know what to expect in this conversation. Her book just seems really interesting, and she's diving into an area that I'm not very knowledgeable of, but very curious about. So I invited her on the show, and I absolutely love this conversation. She was extremely wise and sharp and nuanced, and I think will serve as a really good guide for those of you who are trying to think through what is good and healthy and profitable fiction literature, and how do we discern between other forms of fiction literature that maybe aren't that. So please welcome to the show the one and only Marian Jacobs. Welcome to Theology in Raw, Marian. I have a question for you. Why should Christians read fiction? I mean, isn't this just fake stuff? Shouldn't we just stick to true things like theology and the Bible, and rather than wasting time with fake literature? I'm making people mad by the very question, but I'm some people have this opinion.
Yeah, no, actually, I think that a lot of people have that opinion, and I don't even think that they know that they have it. A lot of times, they're just like intrinsically drawn towards nonfiction. I've heard people say, I just want to like know about real things. I just want to be in reality. And I think that. Or there's a lot of, there's a lot of pragmatism. I would say it's like a stronghold of pragmatism, like in the church, where if it doesn't have like this really obvious, like practical function, especially for something like evangelism or learning theology, then suddenly it has no value to them at all. I think that's like probably one of the most dangerous things that the church doesn't even know it's facing.
Wow. That's a bold statement. Yeah. So what would be let's dig into the weeds here. What would be a theological rationale for reading fiction, being shaped by fiction?
Yeah. Good question. Okay. I want to start with the fact that one of the first things we see and we learn about God and his character is the fact that he's a creator.
Mm-hmm.
And so being beings that are like made in his image, we are naturally creative. And I think you get a lot of pushback saying that because a lot of people want to say I'm not a creative person. And I think what they really mean, if you were to push them on it, is that they're not an artistic person. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they're not a creative person.
Right.
And so I think we need to first have that foundation of, if you are saying, and if you're thinking and telling yourself, I'm not a creative person, that is a little bit like saying I'm not human. And so I think where we need to start is just to say, that's simply not true. Mm-hmm. And then after we can have that foundation of God as a creator, I think we need to then go to the next part, which is the cultural mandate. And we know that this is like a culture making mandate. It's really a pre-fall covenant. And I think that we need to look at this as like that we are creative, that we have that even if we are not artistic, that we enjoy the creations of others. And that when we do create, when we do, as Tolkien said, subcreate in many different ways, we are not only living out who we are as like image bearers, but we are like being obedient to to this pre-fall covenant of the cultural mandate.
What does Tolkien mean by subcreate? What does that mean?
Yeah, good question. Subcreation. I mean, he was talking about subcreating worlds, as in the Lord of the Rings worlds, but I think that it can be more broadly applied to other things that people do. Subcreate. You're creating in submission to God. You're creating underneath God, and creating, if, for example, in fiction and fantasy, you're creating worlds. But so I think that there's one of the most obvious ways that that fiction more generally helps people is to be able to help us develop more empathy. And that is actually like a controversial topic right now. We want people to develop empathy. I heard someone say recently, the problem isn't that we have too much empathy, it's that we have too little empathy. And so that is one of the number one things that fiction like generally helps with. But I think specifically when we have fiction that is meant to show unreality, to show things that are invisible or things that we don't see in our primary world, which again, going back to that stronghold of pragmatism, people just like, I just want to stay in reality. I just want to only read about the things that I can see and touch and feel. You cannot see and touch and feel God. And so when we start to like take our imagination, our minds, and allow it to like soak in a world where we are seeing and experiencing something that we can't normally see and touch and feel, we're allowing ourselves to understand and to open up our capacity to understand God and to have faith in him, and to understand that there are things out in the invisible realm that exist that we cannot see and touch and feel. And I think that when we belittle that experience, we are belittling the supernatural. And it is a miracle. One of the linchpin of our entire religion, which is the resurrection of Jesus Christ, is something that is beyond our comprehension, that is normally not a part of our primary world. And so I think like to be able to soak our minds and our souls in a world that has been subcreated, and that is part of creation. It's a part of the cultural mandate. That is just an essential part of being human. And it opens our mind up to God and to spiritual warfare, and in ways that we like to belittle and we like to say doesn't really play a part of our daily lives. And that's simply not true. And it's a very dangerous thing, a way to live your life.
Yeah.
So
I love your distinction between being artistic and creative. I intuitively made that connection. Like, or I always assumed like, yeah, if you're creative, that means you're artsy or whatever. But like, it is a home builder not creating a house out of lumber is a right. Like, I don't consider myself an artsy person, but I'm a writer, and so I create a book. I mean, it's a whole story, or not story, but more of an argument or whatever, that is still under the broad umbrella of creating. So
even like putting the podcast together, you've created this whole platform, you've created an audience, like you have created many things. A teacher creates new curriculum to help the individual needs of her students. She doesn't even have to be artsy. We are by design creators and sub-creaters. And that is part of the cultural mandate. It's not just, about, having lots of babies. It's about, because there are many people who never have children, and they are still a part of that cultural mandate to go out and to make something of the world, and to make something of what we've been given.
And yet creating human life has to be pretty unique act of creation. And again, you got to be careful here with people that have the structures to create life, but for whatever reason are unable to. But still, that to create another being in God's image is pretty unique and powerful and
miraculous.
And miraculous. And it is fascinating. Women play I don't know. I mean, obviously both male and female are needed for that act. And yet one could argue rightly that the female plays what word should I use here? a more significant or more involved role in the process.
Yes. The weight of the creation is upon her.
Yeah. Jim Gaffigan has a funny line that I won't repeat about the male contribution to procreation. But anyway, when you're talking about fiction literature, it sounds almost like you're thinking more specifically of like fantasy, opening up kind of unseen worlds. But what you're saying though applies to not just fantasy literature. I'm thinking of, I confess to you offline that I have not read many fiction books, and it is pragmatic. It's a time issue. It's I have so many other nonfiction books that I could say for my job that I have to read, whether it's writing a book or ministry or something like that it's hard for me to find time. But I have in the last few years tried to make space for more fiction. So I'm thinking of like a book like The Brothers Karamazov. My word, I that was one of the most theologically challenging books I've ever read. It's a work of fiction, but my goodness, I was reflecting on the problem of evil, of humanity, anthropology, soteriology, all these things, and it's just
that is the beauty of classics, right? That they do, not that there aren't books that make you think that are modern, because I love modern literature, but I think that's the beauty of classics, is you tend to think a little deeper when you read them, and which is why I still definitely read a lot of classics. But yeah, to I think, and not to be too, I don't know, to be sensitive, I do understand like that, we're all just kind of fighting our schedules and barely making it by. Like, I feel that a lot. Of course, you have like a million books that you need to read for your job. I think that there's also an aspect of it where people to have time, you must make time. And if people really understood how important fiction was, and just how much it changes you, and just how much it shapes your even your physical brain, to be able to live in the shoes of another person, and to understand what they're going through, and to understand the trials they face, even if it's not fantasy, which I think fantasy, as I said before, has like a huge contribution to the Christian worldview and the Christian life that a lot of people don't really understand. But fiction in general still has a lot to a role to play in that, in being able to understand another person and their world and their life in a way that you never could anywhere, any place else. And I think that to underestimate how important that is and how much it can change you, especially when you're doing it regularly, I think is one of the biggest reasons that we don't make time.
Yeah. And I know when I am reading good fiction, primarily the classics, because I feel like I haven't read hardly any of the classics. Like a few years ago, I was like, I need to read some of the, like, I should probably have read To Kill a Mockingbird. How did I not read this book? How did I not read Dostoevsky, or what's the Salander, the Catcher in the Rye, and I mean these just classic books. I was like, I don't know how in my educational process I didn't get these. So anyway, when I am reading those books, I do find myself just exercising a mental and even spiritual muscle that hasn't been used before. And I find that my thoughts, my posture, even my behavior, my attitude towards God and the world is these fictional works contribute positively to that.
Absolutely.
Now, when it comes to fantasy, or even things that involved, and I know this is what your latest book deals with, things like magic, the occult, things that some Christians may rightly say, isn't this is this kind of dangerous? Like, are we dealing with, you know, the kind of the dark side of things that we shouldn't be dipping our toe in? And obviously, I don't know how old you are, but, you know, I was, you know, I probably my early 20s when Harry Potter came out. And that was a big deal in the church. You know, all these kids are running around reading Harry Potter, and then the parents are like, isn't this like a bunch of witchcraft? Like, why are my kids reading this stuff? So can you help us navigate that specific conversation around magic, witchcraft, the occult, and fictional fantasy literature?
Yeah. So I do have like an entire chapter on the occult in my book. So if anyone wants to like do a little bit more deep dive on that, that's where they would find it. But I think this is a big question. So how old am I? I was one of those kids in the 90s reading Harry Potter.
Your parents let you?
Sorry?
Or did your parents know, or did you have to sneak it like?
Oh, no. Yeah, no, my parents definitely knew. So I grew up with like a heavy dose of science fiction and fantasy. My parents weren't like huge readers. My sister was, but my dad was a huge movie buff. And so we just watched, especially, I mean, he was more of like a sci-fi kind of a guy. So we did lots of like Star Wars and Star Trek, but we did fantasy too. And so, I got the Harry Potter books as a gift for Christmas. Like my parents were super okay with it. I did not grow up in any kind of like fundamentalism at all.
Okay.
I experienced that as an adult. And so I also have ADHD. And so when I was a kid, I was a terrible reader. I did not like to read. I wanted to go outside and play in the dirt. I wanted to go climb trees. I wanted to ride my bike. My sister would stay indoors and read all day. And I thought she would just like read books like in a day. And I was like, wow, like I'm a bad reader, you know? And then once I got Harry Potter, I was like, oh no, I like this, you know? And so it kind of was what finally like clicked on in my brain. Like I like to read and I like to write. And I think, but I did grow up in the church, and I was just kind of fascinated watching other people I knew have to like navigate, the difficulty with maybe they weren't allowed to read Harry Potter, which was something that I didn't have to navigate. I think that it is confusing, and I've been watching this for, you know, almost 30 years now, watching this, kind of growth of the anger in the late 90s, early 2000s. And even though it's somewhat abated because because the books aren't releasing, I think that we are actually right now entering maybe a second wave of satanic panic. And so I think it is, the question you're asking is really timely. And this topic is really timely. How do we think about the occult? And that it's a really complicated question, basically, because I think there are aspects of Harry Potter that are not perfect and that may be confusing for some readers. And I think that a lot of people who are just love Harry Potter, huge Harry Potter fans, especially if they're Christians, they're just like, this isn't a problem. People aren't tempted by Harry Potter. You're being legalistic. Push it off to the side, ignore it. I don't think that's intellectually honest. I think that we have to be able to say, wait, is that true? Even if that's not a temptation for me, could it be for somebody else? And I think that the answer is maybe. Because what we have had for the last like 20, 30, however long years, since, especially, you know, even back farther than Harry Potter, like when we had Dungeons and Dragons and whatever was going on in the 80s.
Ouija boards,
which we still have Ouija boards, unfortunately.
Do we still have Ouija boards?
You can get it at Barnes and Noble.
I messed with the Ouija board when I was like 10 years old, and it was the freakiest. Honest, I mean, I don't know if it's your mind's telling you that this thing's moving on its own or whatever, but from everything I felt when my hands were on whatever that thing was, I wasn't moving it. And I was telling my friend, are you moving it? And he's freaking out. I ain't moving it. I'm like, I'm not moving it. Are you moving it? This thing's moving, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm like, how does a company rely upon this thing not like being controlled by demonic powers or something? I don't know. I never really processed it. This is the first time I'm processing it. I don't know.
They're not relying on that. Like they're just, I mean, they just realize that this is, I don't know what the company is thinking, honestly. But we do have to navigate this. We do have to ask these questions, and you know, I can get into the theology of it and how exactly we look at it and what really the distinctions are, which is like a little bit of a deep dive, but we do have to ask those questions because right now especially after COVID, we have hit a new phase of like the witchcraft and the new age and the occult is just exploding.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, hugely. You can go online and buy a Ouija, like Holy Spirit Ouija board. Now there's even Christian witchcraft.
Are you serious?
Yeah, you can get prayer tarot cards. I mean, it is not just mainstream. It is like substream. It is like everywhere in every kind of venue you could imagine. And once you like realize how big it is, you'll start seeing it everywhere. Yeah. Like sometimes there have been times I'll just like walk into Barnes and Noble and the little atrium where they put some of their books, will be like books on witchcraft sitting there. So it's really, really big right now. People are starting to recognize it. You can go on YouTube and find probably hundreds or possibly thousands of these like testimony videos called New Age to Jesus testimonies. Wow. And they are just like stories of people who have like been, you know, playing with Ouija boards and doing new age stuff and doing witchcraft and the occult. And there's like hundreds, possibly thousands of them. So it's essential that we start like saying, how should the church respond to this in a way that is like not a satanic panic, but is wise and discerning and tempered with So do you want me to like dig into that?
I do. Because I would love to know, like, what are some, obviously, just because something is fiction and fantasy doesn't mean, oh, this is good to read. I'm sure there's unhelpful, perhaps even bad forms of that, and other ones that are helpful and good, even though both might contain witchcraft type stuff. So help us sort out the good from the bad.
Yeah. So I think it's a lot of people know that like a lot of times when you're going and looking really at almost any theology or topic in scripture or even translation, you want to make sure that you are looking at the context of what's going on around it to understand what does this word mean in this specific context. It could mean one thing in one passage and another thing in another passage. That's not always true, but it is sometimes true. And so we have to do that with words that indicate that something spiritual, something supernatural is going on. So if you go back and look at the word magic in the Bible, it only happens one time in the entire Bible.
Really? Where is it?
It is in Acts. I want to say Acts 8 with Simon, the magician. And it is used to refer to the occult in that context. Anytime the word magic appears in the Old Testament, it's added by translators. So, for example, I think it's Ezekiel. I can't remember the reference, but it says in some translations it'll say magic bands, and it's saying, don't use these magic bands. Word magic is not there. It's just the word is just bands. Oh, they add it because of the cultural context is pagan. And so they realize that there's something going on there that is either superstitious or occultic in nature, and so they're saying you need to stay away from these bands. And that's fine. We add words to help people understand sometimes. It's just that word is not really there. And so when we look at the word miracle, miracle means, a sign or a wonder. And so that's why sometimes it's translated signs and wonders. And so in the New Testament, signs and wonders is just like a flat term to refer to something supernatural that's happening, but it's used to refer to both good and evil supernatural things.
Okay.
And you can just go through and search and like pick out like this one's referring to something Jesus has done or something the disciples has done, or this one is referring to like false prophets or that such thing, or like maybe an antichrist of it's saying that they're going to be doing signs and wonders. So again, we have to use context. So when even in the Bible, when we go through and like look at these words, magic or miracle, or even if the language isn't even there, but something supernatural happened, we have to ask ourselves, is it pagan? And I think like the clearest example is obviously Moses and Pharaoh's magicians, right?
Say,
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the occult. We know it's satanic. I mean, Pharaoh's got his, serpentine headdress. It's polytheism all over the place. We know it's it's the occult, right? So it's very, very cut and dry. And we see that God has authority and has power over other gods. And I think that's I think that when you say, well, it's just sleight of hand magic, I think that really detracts from what's really going on, which is to say not only that like God has authority not only over nature, but over all spiritual beings.
Yeah. The text doesn't say that it was a sleight of hand. It makes it sound like
no, but a lot of people believe that.
Well, and that's just imposed onto the text. I mean, it says that they did like that.
Right.
The whole point is not that these are all fake. They have no access to the spiritual realm. Only God does. It's that God is much more powerful than the powers of darkness they're accessing.
Yeah. So, but what we see is that they're doing the same stuff. What we see is that like they're like copying these miracles that Moses is doing, and they look the same, except that they're not.
Right.
And the source is different, and their motives are different. And so, the context that we're asking are what is the source? What are the motives? What's the setting that this is happening in? And so I end up having I pulled about 5 contextual clues that we need to look at, not just in the Bible, but also in literature. What are the contextual clues surrounding this? Because you could have the word magic, you can have the word spells, you can have incantations, you could even have something as outlandish as divination used, but unless you ask what is the context, you might not know what's really happening in the story and whether this is really a story of good and evil. And we have to so we have to be able to look at something like Harry Potter and ask these questions and figure out the context of what's really happening. We can't just say, well, they cast spells, therefore it's bad.
Hey friends, if Theology in the Raw has blessed or challenged you in any way, would you consider supporting the show through Patreon at patreon.com/Theology in the Raw? We are actually revamping our bonus material that Patreon supporters get. So we are going to 2 bonus Q&As per month for all the different paid levels. Silver level gets access to ask questions for the Q&A episode, and also you will get access to Exiles in Babylon archived content, which will be releasing different videos every month. Also access to bonus research episodes that I'm gonna record from time to time. Access to rough drafts of certain things I'm working on, which is a little scary for me to let people look into that because it's a rough draft. Gold and Gold Plus members get we have monthly Zoom chats and all the other perks that the other tiers get access to as well. So again, if you want to support the show, it really, really does help us to flourish as a ministry. Again, patreon.com/Theology in the Raw. I will see you in the community. I've often said, and this might be too simplistic, but I've often said when it comes to, I typically say this with regard to movies, that the question shouldn't be, does it contain sin or evil? I mean, the Bible contains more evil and sin than any other book probably written, and real life has evil and sin. The question should be, is it promoting sin and evil, or is it simply wrestling with sin and evil? And is
Yeah.
there a more powerful story of redemption involved? One of my favorite movies is Clint Eastwood's the Gran Torino. Tons of swearing, racial slurs, all this stuff, and it's just like it's but all of that's necessary for this subtle, powerful theme of redemption that ends, spoiler alerts, 20 years old, with him acting, dying as a substitute in the shape of a cross on behalf of people who used to be his enemies who are now his friends. I mean, it's just such a powerful, but it wouldn't have been a powerful movie if there was no swearing and racial slurs, because even the racial slurs are like whole part of the whole beautiful story of redemption, where he kind of is redeemed from his racism. I mean, through enemy love. I mean, it's just so powerful. So is that too simplistic, or is it kind of what you're saying? Like the question of, does it contain evil versus is it promoting evil?
So, and I would say, yes, that is part of what I'm talking about, especially as we understand like literary categories and like what these things are supposed to represent, like all the swearing and everything that you're talking about, like what does that represent? And we absolutely have to see darkness. I think that we also have to make sure that it's not just, there's those books that are like seeing God or seeing the gospel in such and such a thing. And I try to kind of like pull out the gospel threads in secular stories. And that's good. And it's good to do that sometimes. But I kind of like you are saying we can find threads of common grace in almost any story. But I think that unless we see the characters, using whatever their power is, it doesn't have to be supernatural power. It can be any type of power that they have or gifting or whatever, that if they're stewarding with humility, versus pride, right? If there's the context of like the upside down kingdom, I think is extremely important in the like relational settings. And I think like those types of things have to also be seen for them to grow in and understand throughout their character arc. And then you see the entire plot of the narrative too. Is the whole plot of the narrative ultimately glorifying evil? So even if it ends with, and I haven't seen that movie, so I can't really say specifically for that movie, but even if it ends with something that appears to be like this kind of crucifixion, is it in line with something that the character is learning? Is it in line with the theme? And in the end, is the arc here that something that shows us not just the gospel, but that ultimately we love others humbly, we serve the lowly, we etc. I think that those are the things that we're looking for in a character arc and in a theme and in an overarching plot. But I think you're absolutely right. We have to not just say, is there something bad going on in the story, therefore it's bad. It's like, no. What's the purpose of the bad thing?
Right.
What is it? And what is it doing in the story overall? So I think, we have to make sure also that sometimes it's that conclusion that you're talking about that really wraps up the story and says, this was the purpose of all of that.
Yeah.
And so we can't just make snap judgments because like, oh my gosh, I saw something woke in this storyline. And therefore now this movie is horrible. That is a very immature way and a very, immature understanding of what literature is or how stories are structured. A lot of that was coming out. I think there was a lot of that kind of coming out with when Wicked, came out. It was like, oh my gosh, this story is so woke. And I think, and I just sat back and I was like, I don't think you understand this story at all. So I know that's probably a controversial thing to say, but
no, I can't wait for the word woke to fall out of use, which will happen probably quickly. I mean, these trends come and go so quickly, and it's
I hope so.
It's just so lazy and unhelpful. It's like, what do you mean? Okay, so I've only read the first Harry Potter book. My daughter got into it. She read the series a few times, and I think I've watched maybe 2 or 3 of the movies and stuff. So I know very little about it. But what's just to use that as an example? So we're going back in time here, but like what would you say are some maybe unhelpful or maybe occurrences of magic in the occult that you think is like, oh, these are things Christians should maybe critique versus what are some redemptive themes in the storyline of the series that are like, hey, these are things Christians should appreciate?
Yeah. So first of all, it's good to note that J.K. Rowling has said that she is a Christian. She's a very liberal Christian.
Sure.
She has said that she had attends the or is a member at the Church of Scotland, or I believe. She did intentionally write some gospel themes into the story. And so, but that is not to say part of, I think, why people don't see her as a Christian author at all. Not just because maybe some differences in values, but also because she is a materialist. That I don't think she really fully believes that there is such a thing as witchcraft. She has admitted to struggling with even believing that there's life after death. And so that's really helpful context when going into it, because when analyzing what is going on in the story, J.K. Rowling does not believe in witchcraft. She has stated that. And so she doesn't care that her world and the world that she built in some ways looks like the occult. In some ways. In some ways it does not at all. She doesn't care that there's maybe spell casting or that she has a class on divination, because it's not a threat. It's not a real threat, right? Like we would say that it is.
For her, it truly is a fictional world. She's not trying to make connections to the real world. Okay.
Right. So it is a mixed bag. They do have a class on divination. There's some astrology, potion making, and even though there's a lot of that does not look anything like the real world, there are small aspects of it that do, and so we have to go in there being able to discern that. But I would say that I think I do let my kids read Harry Potter, and I do like Harry Potter, but I also teach them about which aspects maybe are a little too close to home. But I think it's really important to note that they are not calling upon demonic forces or any spiritual forces to empower their spells, because the kids, the people, the witches and wizards in this world, are born that way. And so it's what I like to call the supernatural as natural. It's nature. It's you have magical plants and animals.
Yeah.
You have these, and you have things called muggles, which are non-magical people because they just weren't born that way. You can't just have a person decide to become a witch because they want to. They can't. And I think that is probably a really important distinction, that this, even if it looks like the occult, even if they're using words like divination and reading tea leaves, and going to, astrology class, and they, it's just not the world, the world as a whole is just not the same. So you could even make a case for saying that, that any time in any story where you have the supernatural as natural, where your supernatural gifting is from birth, you could even make a case to say, well, that's nature, therefore it is maybe empowered by God, which for some people would probably be going a little too far. But it's a huge distinction. And I do think that there's a lot of value and a lot in Harry Potter, and there's a lot of good in it. And when I go through, I have an entire chapter on Harry Potter in the book. I go through all 5 discernment questions, and there's only one that's a little bit of a mixed bag. Every single one of them, she is hitting the mark where it needs to be.
Interesting.
On all 4 other questions, she's hitting the mark where it needs to be. And honestly, she does it better than a lot of other people. Where she's intentionally making these people, giving them real virtue, that I think is very oftentimes can be very Christ-like. So yeah.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Mark Buvine, who's an evangelical pastor. I remember years ago when all this was, all the debates were happening around Harry Potter, and he's huge into fiction literature and everything. And he said, and I don't know the story. I don't know how it ends. So yeah, you can spoil it for me. I don't really care. But he was like, Harry Potter has one of the most beautiful, powerful themes of redemption of any work in fictional literature. It is, and he would say like, this is the gospel or whatever, but its powerful gospel themes or values far outweigh whatever kind of like things were like, well, this is off and this doesn't represent a Christian worldview. And he's like, Christians that just focus on, there's magic in it, kind of miss the underlying power of it.
So
exactly.
It
sounds like nobody's talking about. I don't even know what he's talking about. But.
He's right. He's right on the money. Like she's very explicit, very intentional in how she wrote the ending. It was intended to be a representation of the gospel. And you could say it's not quite as accurate as, say, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where you kind of have like this aspect of, penal substitutionary atonement, right. Which is not present in Harry Potter, but everything else, I think that she did it yes, very intentionally, very well. And she even includes like Bible verses, like on tombstones, and very, very intentionally chosen verses. So it's really a beautiful story and a beautiful book. And I think that people who are just like, well, I'm really uncomfortable with the fact that her, she's including kind of this occult like things in the story, like that just makes me too uncomfortable, therefore it's bad. I think they're missing out on a lot.
I also, I don't know, it kind of bothers me, and not that I get super irritated, but sometimes Christians can have a inconsistent standard, or more, maybe their view of biblical values is so narrow, because the same people that might say, don't ever read or watch Harry Potter will let their kids watch movies and cartoons that glamorize secular romance, have no problem with vengeance. Do not promote love of your enemy, but destroy your enemy. Like core Christian values, like how many Christians have been just shaped by a secular view of marriage and romance and relationships, that you're incomplete until you find your, soulmate or whatever, or you need some hero to come sweep you off your feet. And that has actually done more damage to our view of marriage and relationships than I think reading Harry Potter. From my vantage point, not that Harry Potter hasn't led some people into the occult, maybe it has, but just being even Bugs Bunny. Or the Roadrunner and Elmer Fudd and all these. It's like there's violence everywhere, and it's maybe a cheeky example, but it's just
Yeah, I think something that has kind of shifted in my thinking as I have gone through and really cemented these like contextual clues about magic in my brain. I realize I can apply them in so many other places other than just magic. And a lot of it is just to like other stories like that. Like it's what I'm looking for is, what are the clues that God is at work, and what are the clues where Satan is at work? And you can apply that in so many ways, and you can apply that in those kind of situations as well. And if these things are not falling into line, then this is not of the Lord. I've even started applying these things to, when I start hearing about politics, and I don't want to talk about politics, but I think the point is just to say, like, we can see what is of God and what is not of God. And when those things start popping up, I think that we need to start saying, instead of is there magic in this story, or is there something that in this story that I don't like? We need to start asking like deeper questions about virtue and about where is the story going. And we also need to understand literature a little bit better. There's a lot of Christian reviews out there that just often miss the whole point of the story, and they miss the forest through the trees. So
yeah. Have you read C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy?
yes, but it's been quite a few years.
I had a buddy of mine that said that series, a Christian friend, those, I guess, 3 books. He said that shaped his Christian worldview more than any other nonfiction book he's ever read. So maybe you want to read it. I don't know.
I will warn you though, they are very weird.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're very weird, especially the third one. But I think that is to C.S. Lewis's credit. He has a tendency, I think, to not care so much what Christians are gonna think about what he writes. He's like, I'm just gonna write what I want to write. Yeah. And I think he did that too in Narnia, honestly, because you have Aslan talking about deep magic, and he even says like it's an incantation. He's talking about the law and the gospel, and he's calling it an incantation. So I think that's to his credit, where he writes what he thinks that needs to be said. So
why does he get away with Christians being totally fine with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Because would you say you said, like you said, it's pretty on the nose with the gospel theme of penal substitution and resurrection, all this stuff. But yeah, there's deep magic, and there's, I guess, could be similar things Christians who are concerned about Harry Potter should be maybe concerned about.
I think there's a small percentage of Christians that do have a problem with Narnia. It is small though. I think most people would say they let their kids not read Harry Potter, but they can read Narnia. It's probably just like surface level things, like you said, the very, very obvious, Jesus lion, and then the fact that the actual main characters are not holding wands and going around, cursing each other. I think that probably, but at the end of the day, he said deep magic, he said incantation. I think that's pretty on the nose, and I think it's telling it that we've got to use context. We've got to use, because that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the gospel. So I think it's just, there are levels of people who are just like, how strict are you going to be with your kids, and where are you going to draw the lines? But it is inconsistent. I think another inconsistency that I see is not just with Narnia, but like, you're not allowed to read Harry Potter, but you can read, or you can watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I'm like, that's way more pagan than Harry Potter is, and they're like Buddhist, and there's like fortune tellers, and the inconsistency is kind of astounding at times. But I want to be generous and say this is just a confusing topic. People don't understand it. They don't understand the occult. They don't understand what the markers are of what they really should be looking for. And oftentimes they've been told, like, I have some friends who grew up this way. They were told, if you have Harry Potter or any book that would be considered evil in your home, that is a doorway to Satan attacking you, just by having that book inside your house.
Yeah.
And they grow up just being terrified. Even having even something like the Book of Mormon. I have the Book of Mormon in my house. Therefore, like, there's a demonic portal that's going to be like, now there's demons entering my home and, messing up my life. And that's why I'm suffering, because I have the Book of Mormon or Harry Potter in my house. And we have to, I think that is, even though it sounds ridiculous, there are a lot of people out there who believe that and who were probably raised that way and are terrified, even for their kids, to pretend the wrong thing, they kind of treat demons like they're germs. Which is part of the satanic panic. So
yeah. What are some fictional books that you would recommend that are maybe maybe some recent ones, or even ones besides Harry Potter, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, all that, but like ones that you say, man, if your kids, like for parents, if your kids are really into reading and love fiction, here's some books that would be really good for them to think through.
Yeah. Some that probably most of them are already reading would be The Wingfeather Saga by Andrew Peterson. S.D. Smith has the Green Ember series. those are some of the more popular mainstream ones. But I don't particularly read tons of like children's fiction in middle grade.
Okay.
I read adult and YA mostly.
Okay.
But I suggest checking out. There's actually a ton of Christians who are writing science fiction and fantasy right now.
Really?
And
Is Peterson? Is he a Christian? I forget. Oh no.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He's a Christian musician. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a ton of Christians out there. And I think, and one of the reasons I like promoting Christian fiction, even though it has a bad reputation, there are a lot of people out there who are doing it well. And we are just trying to get over the stigma of bad Christian fiction and bad Christian art.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there who are really good at it and are not producing bad Christian art. They're doing the hard work. It's just not out into the mainstream yet.
Okay.
But there's a lot of publishers. I would say if you're looking for children's literature, go to lorehaven.com, LORE haven.com. And there's an entire like online library. You can look up books that are science fiction and fantasy of all ages, And they some of them have reviews and content warnings. And those are all written by Christians. Some of them are in the general market, some not. But yeah, like I said, I like promoting Christian fiction because unfortunately, a lot of secular fiction, especially YA and adult, is pornographic at this point.
Really?
It's extreme. Oh my gosh, it is like it's just the way that books are written now.
Wow.
And so, if somebody has a teen that is like just binging a bunch of like YA that's secular, I can pretty much guarantee you they are just being repeatedly exposed to softcore porn.
Wow. Okay.
So
are there some popular books that you can name along those lines?
Popular books. You mean the pornographic ones?
Yeah, the ones you would say, if you see your child reading this, you might want to look into it.
Yeah. So I don't really read them. But like the most popular ones right now, I think they're called, oh my gosh, it's the author is Rebecca Yaros. They're like, I can't remember the name of Fourth Wing, I think it's called. Like I said, I don't read them, so it's not, the names are not popping up in my head immediately, but they are they're not softcore. They're just pornographic.
Really?
And I think they're not YA, I believe they're like new adult, which is like one step above YA. Okay. There's YA, young adult, new adult, and then adult. So these are like basically like college age. And it's like you'll get pages worth of like descriptive sex scenes in them. So, but there's like that kind of stuff in YA, but a little softer than that. Just like, softcore type of content, but it's just the way that books are written now. But yes, if you go to lorehaven.com, there's like an entire catalog basically where you can look stuff up. There's publishers, Christian publishers like Enclave Publishing. They do all Christian science fiction and fantasy. Some of it is general market. Not all of it is like explicitly Christian, but it's written by Christians. And so there's actually a lot of publishers and authors, independent authors out there trying to get the church to pay attention to them and to care about science fiction and fantasy. Yeah. And they're working hard. They're doing a good job. So
I was going to ask you, because you mentioned like we're so used to kind of like cheesy Christian art, and but you're saying these are actually really, really good literature. And so, sometimes I don't know when Christians write, I don't know if I'm my assumption is, because I haven't read a ton in this area, but like it seems like when Christians do fiction, it's just like it's so on the nose, explicit Christian that sometimes the artistic power seems it seems less powerful. Like good art like invites the reader to come in and explore and mess with their minds and makes the connections on their own rather than spoon feeding them, all of those connections.
I mean, we talk about it all the time. How do you tell a story as a Christian without being cheesy, without being on the nose, without being preachy, and do it with good craft to the best of your ability? It is I would say constant conversation. How do we do this? How do we do it well? How can I bring gospel themes into my stories without saying Jesus?
Right.
When some people do, some people just say it, and so everyone has their own preference. But I've read many, many books where the story is amazing, super well written, very, very much pulling you in, just like any book would. And sometimes they are just, have characters that pray, and it's not, but they just did it so well. But then again, there are also stories where it's just the themes are really subtle. You can just tell, I think this person's a Christian, but there's, it's not so obvious. It's not so on the nose. Maybe they don't have a Christian that's outright praying.
How
or
would
they're more, yeah, go ahead.
How would you respond to somebody who could push back on what both of us are kind of saying? Like, well, why should they be ashamed of the gospel? Why not make it just super clear and right there? Like, why hide the gospel? Like, why make it so vague and oblivious, or maybe so hidden that somebody has to discover? Let's just put it make the gospel on the nose.
I think Lewis and Tolkien would have a lot to say about that. Tolkien definitely, Lewis was like more on the nose about it. Tolkien really just kind of wove Christian virtue into his stories. And was like, I'm just going to write a good story. That's really, as a believer, as a Christian, it's really not about going around beating people over the head with it. It's just about telling people that this is how honorable, upright, godly people live their lives. And so it's also about preference. Again, it's about preference. Some authors believe you absolutely need to be beating people over the head with the gospel. You absolutely need to not be ashamed. And you should be. And other people are just saying, I'm just trying to write a good story. And I'm trying to create, just like an artist would sit down and paint a picture of maybe a scene they see. It doesn't necessarily have to have a painting of Jesus in it to be glorifying to God. But again, I think C.S. Lewis would say, he did say that this is about, sneaking past the watchful dragons of the mind. And which is, have you ever heard that phrase?
No, I like it.
Okay, it's actually pretty popular phrase within like the Christian fantasy circle. It means that when he wrote Narnia, he's like, what if I, put the gospel into this world, and to sneak past these Sunday school, which is his way of saying cheesy, associations with church, and to sneak past those dragons, those watchful dragons, of like, is it cheesy? Is it churchy? And to be able to sneak past those dragons, and tell a story and get into someone's heart, and really show them this is what the gospel is. And it's not cheesy. It's gripping.
Right.
And of course his was on the nose, but a lot of children don't know that when they're reading it. They're just like, wow, this is an incredible story. He's sneaking past the watchful dragons in their minds. And to be able to say the story of redemption is gripping. I
would add to that too. Like I think it's psychologically more powerful and effective in most cases when somebody discovers something on their own, rather than being told something and then do I believe it or not, but being sucked into a story and connecting the dots on their own. It's kind of like a Socratic method of debating, rather than just point A, point B, points, and hammering people with a linear argument, like leading them to letting them discover the truth for themselves. Oftentimes it takes a deeper root when they do that.
Well, right. And that's the brilliance of fiction too, is they're walking in this person's shoes. They're empathizing with them, they're understanding their story, and they're discovering as that person discovers. And I think that can be a lot more powerful than just hearing a sermon.
Right.
Isn't that why sermons use illustrations in the first place?
Good ones,
to get people to realize, oh wait, this applies to me. This I understand how this relates to my life. And to be able to walk through that with another person, to empathize with them, yeah, exactly. You're discovering as they discover. And I think that it's a huge Christian fiction done well and not
Right.
in this cheesy way is one of the most powerful ways to teach someone about God.
Yeah. Hey, I got one more question for you. Going back to what we were talking about before, Harry Potter. Harry Potter, I don't know how many millions of copies they sold, but I mean, it impacted an entire culture.
Yeah.
And now you say 2 decades later, there's a massive rise in interest in the occult, witchcraft.
Yeah.
Is there a connection there? Like,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I've got an answer to that. So, like I said before, you can go on YouTube and watch these testimonies, thousands, hundreds. So I did that. I watched 200
Oh my Lord. Wow.
testimonies.
That's a lot of YouTube.
Yeah, it was. I did it on 2 times speed. And I made a spreadsheet and I wrote down, like, how did these people get into the occult?
Okay.
How did they get into witchcraft? How did they get into the New Age? And first of all, I would like to quickly say that not a single one of them said that the magic that they were doing wasn't real. Every single solitary person was like, this is real, this is dangerous, this is demonic, stay away.
Wow.
And so how did they get into that? And 70%, this is the biggest reason that people get into it. 70% said that they had a history of trauma or mental health problems.
Wow.
And it was absolutely the hole in your heart scenario of, I have a problem and I need to put something in it and I need to feel in control of my life. And the way that you feel in control sometimes is to do magic.
Wow.
And that is why, like, things like manifesting and little, like, light new age kind of like cotton candy new age things or diet witchcraft, sometimes I like to call it, is like so mainstream right now and everyone's doing it.
Diet witchcraft? What is that?
That's my term.
Oh.
Yeah. So were there people that had fictional magic on that journey? It was 11 people out of 200, which was 5.5%.
That's it?
All of those 11 people, except one, had a history of trauma or mental health problems.
Wow. Okay.
And so, and when I say fictional magic was on that journey, it was stuff like, there were like maybe 2 or 3 people who mentioned Harry Potter. But then it was other stuff like the wild thornberries, which had like a little girl who could talk to animals, or Matilda, or one of them said Halloween Town. There was like a Wicca girl in there. But they were like light things that even people who aren't allowed to read Harry Potter maybe might let their kids watch or read.
Wow.
Like the wild thornberries. It's like the most, like, it's just about a kid who can talk to animals, you know? So, like, it's, I would say that, is it possible that this could be a temptation? Yes, it's possible, but it is like a very small minority.
But that's also that I mean, people could read every cult leader that I'm aware of read the Bible and probably got inspired to, in a weird way, you know, just because somebody like something good can lead certain people to doing bad things. So I mean, even if it was a higher percentage than 2 or 3%, whatever, we would still have to ask the question of correlation and causation. But here, there's not even a lot of correlation, let alone causation, in terms of, wow, that's shocking.
I talked to 2 people out of those 11. I talked to 2 of them personally, and they both said it really wasn't about the fiction. Like, I would have done it anyway. And it was just like, they just said, I was just hurting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So
that's insightful. Wow.
Yeah. But so, yeah, I think that if a child is tempted by fictional magic, and a parent sees the need to restrict something like that for a time, I would say that parent probably also needs to be asking their child some other questions about what's really going on and why maybe they feel the need to be tempted towards magic in that way.
Well, Marian, I'll let you go, but before I do, we've kind of mentioned your book a couple times throughout the episode. Tell us name of the book, and give us a 30-second overview of what it's all about.
Yeah. Name of the book is On Magic and Miracles, a Theological Guide to Discerning Fictional Magic. And it is, the first half is, it's theology of magic, theology of supernatural. And then the second half is how to use that to discern and apply to literature.
Awesome.
Or games or movies.
Awesome. Thanks for being a guest on Theology Raw. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
This show is part of the Converge Podcast Network.